So Corsair claims that this new Frame 4000 case gives a new meaning to the word customization. It's a case that can change or grow to suit your needs with almost limitless options such as billet aluminium motherboard trays, interchangeable front panels and upgradable front I/O. It also comes equipped with Corsair's new InfiniRail fan mounting system. It's designed for reverse connector motherboards and it's optimized for high airflow and powerful cooling. So all that sounds great on paper, but how does it work in the real world? Let's find out. So this is the new Corsair Frame 4000 case, shares a similar name to a previous Corsair case. It is kind of an evolution of the previous 4000 series, the 4000D, Airflow, etc. It's available in several different versions, all in black or white and with or without fans. You can pick this up now currently in the UK from Scan, priced at £79.99 for the base version with no fans, while the 4000D RS ARGB version comes with 3 fans and that's priced at just under £100. Frame 4000 is a spacious and fully modular PC case with near limitless customization options, including a selection of outer panels, motherboard trays and upgradable front I/O panels when they become available. Supports multiple 360mm radiator installation, 120, 140, 160 and 200mm fans using Corsair's new InfiniRail mounting system. It features versatile front I/O connectivity, large GPU support with an integrated anti-sag bracket, as well as support for back connect motherboards and easy iCue link integration. So as I say, this is the evolution of the original 4000D. That's the way to look at this case. It is slightly larger in dimensions compared to the original 4000D. This measures 487 by 239 by 486 millimeters, and it features a fully modular design. So let's take a look at how all those modular panels work, starting with the outer panels. So this tempered glass side panel is held in place with a couple of thumb screws, captive thumb screws. Loosen those off and then just push the panel outwards and then that releases. You can see on this white version it's a completely clear tempered glass side panel. Top panel's held in place with a couple of thumb screws too, again captive. Then it's got a little handle at the back, you pull it backwards and then that lifts out and you can see the top panel is a very heavily ventilated top panel. Should be good for airflow, and it's got the familiar perforations in this Y shape that Corsair has been using recently. You can see at the back there's the handle there. It's got a little Corsair logo on that handle and the 2 captive thumb screws. Right hand side panel comes off in a similar way. There's 2 thumb screws holding it in place. Once you've got those released, pushes outwards and then just clips off. It is quite a standard looking plain steel side panel, but you notice it does have a large vent down here because you can install some side mounted fans. There is a dust filter, a magnetic dust filter on there. It's the perforated steel type, held in place magnetically. And then this panel is just a plain steel panel. There's no sound dampening material or anything. It's quite flexible, that side panel. It doesn't feel the greatest quality, but it does use captive thumb screws to hold it in place. Let's flip it round to the front so you can get a better view at this front panel. This is quite interesting. It's got that familiar Y-shaped perforation that Corsair uses, but it's also kind of pressed out and it has like a 3D look to it. Quite like the look of that front panel. That can be removed quite easily. There's no screws that hold this in place. It's just on some quick release fittings, so that clips off really easily. And then behind the main front panel is a dust filter, and it's a nylon type dust filter on a plastic frame. Just below the mesh front panel and the filters is the front I/O panel. On there are 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A ports, a single USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port, a single combined 3.5mm audio jack and power button. There's no LCD panel or LCD screen on this case, but what you do get is Corsair's new InfiniRail fan mounting system. You can see this RS ARGB version comes with 3 Corsair 120mm RS series fans pre-installed at the front, but these 2 rails that hold the fans in position can be moved and widened so you can fit in there either 140mm fans or potentially 2 200mm fans. You can install a radiator up at the front as well. It's up to 360mm, so that includes a 280, 240 or a 360. At the top, this also uses Corsair's new InfiniRail mounting system. One of the brackets slides and allows you to install either 3 120, two 140 or 260mm fans. Up at the top, you can also install up to a 360mm radiator. So that includes 240, 280 and 360. This cable management panel at the side of the motherboard tray, this can be moved into two different positions, so you can move it either further to the front or closer to the motherboard tray, depending on the size of the motherboard you've got installed. You can also remove that, so it's just one screw that pulls out, and you can install the included side fan bracket. On that side mount, you can install either three 120 or 240mm fans, or up to a 360mm radiator. Integrated into the cable management panel is a GPU anti-sag bracket, and there's just a little screw on the front there. You can just adjust that up and down depending on position of your graphics card, tighten the screw back up, and that works as a GPU anti-sag bracket. In terms of motherboard support, it's up to eATX motherboards 305mm by 277, also ATX, micro ATX and mini ITX motherboards. You can install back connect motherboards in here, so motherboards with the connections on the reverse side. Maximum CPU cooler height is up to 170mm tall, and maximum graphics card length is up to 430mm long. As I say, it's a fully modular case, so there's more panels that can be removed. This power supply cover or power supply shroud cover, this is obviously heavily ventilated, so it allows some airflow in, and it's also removable. There's a single thumb screw that holds it in place. Release that, and then that just pops out. It can allow airflow in, but it does come with this blanking piece that just blanks off the airflow. So if you don't want airflow going through the power supply shroud, leave that blanking, but if you want to open it up, you just remove the blanking piece. The top of the power supply shroud, on here you can also install a couple of 120mm fans, so if you want some more direct airflow to the graphics card, there's two 120s can be installed there. This panel can also be removed. You just need to remove 3 screws and then it lifts out really easily. On top of the power supply shroud, there's a couple more cutouts there, so if you're not using a back connect motherboard, you might want to pass cables up through there. Just spin the case round to the rear. It's got a pretty conventional ATX style layout. At the top here, there's a 120 or 140mm fan mount. Potentially you could also install a 120 or 140mm radiator in there. Cut out for the rear motherboard I/O. There's 7 horizontal PCIe slots, but if you just take out a couple of thumb screws, again captive, you can switch that panel round. Screw the thumb screws back in, and that gives you the option for vertical GPU mounting. Below that is the power supply mount. There's a couple of captive thumb screws in there, so Corsair suggested maybe you can install the power supply just using 2 of those screws. And then there's a little cover here that says link on it, but it means iCue link. So if you're using iCue link compatible hardware inside your system and you want to link that up to your desktop, you can just remove that and pass the cable through there. Round the right hand side, you can see cable management comes pretty tidy, and all the cables in this white version of the case, they are all white cables with white connectors, which is good to see. In terms of storage support, so here you've got one removable storage bracket, a single thumb screw, and that releases. On here you can install either 2 2.5 inch drives or a single 3.5 inch drive. If I just remove this cable management panel, just take out one screw and lifts out. So with that removed, you can then get access to the second storage drive panel. And again, on here, you can install either 2 2.5 inch SSDs or a 3.5 inch drive. So potentially you could install 4 2.5 inch SSDs and 2 3.5 inch drives. Underneath the power supply shroud, there is space for ATX power supplies up to 220mm long. Another removable part of the case is the motherboard tray. So apparently there's going to be some different motherboard trays you can fit in here. There's a billet aluminium one, so you can swap this tray out, get the cables out of the way and remove a few screws. And that just pushes forward and then release really easily. You can see there, motherboard tray out of the system, all the cutouts there for back connect motherboards. The case is compatible with Corsair iCue software, but thankfully all the fans use standard 4-pin PWM headers, and they use a standard 3-pin 5V ARGB connection. So if you don't need to install iCue, if you don't have other Corsair hardware inside the system that depends on it, you don't need to install the software, which is good. Then onto the floor of the case, it's got quite a bit of ground clearance, about 25mm from the 4 plastic feet anti-vibration rubbers on those feet. At the back here is a filter for the power supply fan. It's a nylon filter on a plastic frame. With the filter removed, you can see there's a large vent for the power supply fan there. The front of the floor is pretty much solid, but you have this series of notches for adjusting the position of the floor mounted storage bracket. Corsair also includes some accessories with the Frame 4000D. You get a bag full of installation screws, and there's a bunch of zip ties included here for cable management. They are white or clear zip ties, so they match the white theme of the system. There's also an adapter cable for the front panel connection, so if it's not a single one, if the single connector doesn't work, it's split into individual connections there. There's an additional anti-sag bracket. Corsair calls this a mini GPU anti-sag bracket or something like that. There's also the side fan bracket, so you just remove one screw, take the cable management panel out, and you can fit this side fan bracket in there. The other accessory included is this blanking plate for the side bracket. Not sure why you would really need that, but it is included anyway. You can see the test system is built. It was a really easy and simple build. No issues really with the build, other than one of the screw mounts for the AIO doesn't quite line up with the cutout in the chassis for it, because the tubes with them at the front actually foul the fans and don't allow the AIO to go all the way towards the front to let that screw align. That could have been solved by Corsair maybe just elongating the hole a little more. Seems like a bit of a design oversight, that, especially considering it's a Corsair AIO that I've used in the build too. For the other test system hardware, I've used an AMD Ryzen 9800 X3D CPU. The motherboard is the ASRock X870 Steel Legend Wi-Fi. Graphics card is the Inno3D RTX 4080 Super X3 OC White. Memory, it's a 32GB kit, so two 16GB modules of Corsair Dominator Titanium DDR5 6000. For storage, it's just a 1TB Corsair MP600 Elite PCIe Gen 4 x 4 NVMe M.2 SSD, and the power supply is a Seasonic Focus GX1000 ATX3 White 80 Plus Gold, fully modular. For thermal testing, I've used a combination of just the stock RS fans that come pre-installed in the front, but I also added some additional fans to the power supply shroud as intake and to the side mount, so fitted this side bracket, tested the case thermal performance with those bottom fans and side fans included too. If you want to check out the full testing methodology, there's a written review page over at kitguru.net. All the testing methodology is on there. For the thermal load, it's a combined Cinebench R23 and 3D Mark Speedway stress test run simultaneously for 30 minutes. With the case in the default configuration, how it ships from Corsair with three front 120mm intake fans, both CPU and GPU average temperature look great at 57 and 44 degrees Celsius over ambient. The airflow is so well optimized that removing the glass side panel has little effect on temperatures. However, adding three 120mm side intake fans improve the CPU temperature a little more, bringing it down by 3 degrees Celsius on average. Adding two fans to the top of the power supply shroud as intakes lowers GPU temperature a little, but it's not enough to create a noticeable performance increase, so the cost of adding additional fans might not be worth it. Installing a rear exhaust fan has very little effect on either the CPU or GPU temperature when using an AIO cooler, but it may help to exhaust hot air when using a CPU tower cooler. Since the Frame 4000D has great airflow and cooling, noise output of the system with the case in its default configuration is low, as the fans don't need to ramp up too high to keep the system cool. Changing fan configuration does little to the noise output, as the fan speed can be kept low even at high CPU and GPU load. Removing the glass side also did little to the system noise output, as again the fan speed is always quite low even at high system load. So it's a good case this, it's a good evolution over the original 4000D, and I think it's an improvement on some of the recent cases we've seen from Corsair like the 6500X and the 3500X. It's very easy to build with, no issues during the installation other than that minor problem with the screw mounting on the AIO. Alignment of motherboard standoffs, PCIe slot cutouts, all things like that are really good. It's also got a really useful cutout at the top panel, so if you remove the outer top panel and you want to connect up EPS power cables or fan header cables at the top of the motherboard, once you've got an AIO installed, there's a really useful cutout there that allows a bit extra space for that. So that means it's not technically necessary for the case to have removable fan mounts up there. Plenty of space to work with inside the case. Corsair's done a good job with cable management in here. There's plenty of eyelets for zip tying cables down to, and there's lots of Velcro straps included in the case. Everything seems to work as it should do in terms of cable management, and that's a good thing to see because it wasn't that long ago that Corsair decided that cable management should be an optional extra that users have to purchase separately, like the 6500X, but now it's back with full cable management included in the base spec of this case, which is a good thing. It's very positive that Corsair's gone back on those kind of decisions. The thermal performance seems good too, even with just the stock 3 fans installed in the front panel as intakes. Thermal performance of the CPU and GPU are bang on what we would expect for the CPU and GPU configuration. The customizable panels, I can't really say anything about those because they're not available yet. It's a shame that they're not available for us to take a look at, but I do like the idea of being able to customize the case. The only other customization I would have liked to have seen is the front I/O, to be able to move that to different positions. So if you've got your case on the desk, you might have it side on. You might find it better for the I/O to be down at the side here for access while you're sat at your desk or whatever. But I do like the idea of the customizations, it's just a shame that we can't see them. In terms of the price, I think Corsair seems to have got that right with this case. It's between £80 to £100 depending on which version of the case you buy, and that kind of puts it in the low to mid-range territory in terms of the price, but it has some really useful premium features like the InfiniRail fan mounts. The customization, you could say that is a premium feature of the case. The anti-sag brackets, the rotatable PCIe slots, they're all premium features that you might not always expect at this price point, so it seems like a good value case. It's got good airflow, good cooling, build quality is okay, there's some excessive flex in the right hand side panel, but other than that, it's a really good case, and it's a return to form, I think, from Corsair. So that's the Corsair Frame 4000D. Let me know what you think of this case in the YouTube comment section. Also, if you've enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to Kit Guru. If you enjoy what we do here at Kit Guru and you want to help support us, you could always head over to the store, pick up some merch, or you could even subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.